company for the next few hours.
You are not going to believe the company.
This company.
You're going to bankrupt your mama's company.
At least I have the radio to keep me company.
On 93.5 and 107.5, The Fan.
So, Eddie, here's the thing. We know there are two certainties to this morning on this Thursday, okay? The first is that the Colts have locked in Jonathan Taylor for 2 more years. And the second, now there's nothing that creates honesty and humility more. 2 things, of course, of which, are the main composition that make me. And my Aunt Carol is here, comes to visit from Florida, and I haven't seen Carol in, I don't know, maybe 4 or 5 years, but I see her fairly often. But my Aunt Carol is here to visit and stopped by here. My sister picked her up at the airport, and I see Aunt Carol, and the first thing she says is, "Oh, well, Ma, you've gone gray." That's the first thing she said. Now, Eddie, that right there tells me there are certain certainties that just happen, and it develops. You're aware of it, but you're not necessarily keenly aware of it. And then, boom, it's presented right there before your very eyes, and you say, well, this is now, I guess, something that is plain for everyone to see.
How does that make you feel?
Honestly, you know what? I'm going to go philosophical on you here, Eddie. In all seriousness, it makes me feel I had to laugh, number one, because I love Carol's honesty. Number two, I'm aware of it. That's why I keep my hair short. But number three, and I know this wasn't the answer you were thinking about, but when I was a younger guy, the first of my group of friends to pass away was my buddy Turhan. And I remember mentioning to my friend Sheila about what a tragedy it was that Turhan passed away because there was so much that he had left to give to the world. And Sheila said, it's a reminder, Jake, of why when we get old and get wrinkles and get gray, we need to embrace that instead of denying it because we are afforded the opportunity to grow into that era. And so it makes me feel fortunate, to be honest with you. But no matter what you can do when you start to go gray, the reality is it's there and it's for the world to see. And there are certain things that you knew were going to happen, but it wasn't until it did that it then becomes, you're like, okay, now this is something that can be for certain you're more aware of it, even though it was always in the back of your mind. Like, for example, I think we knew that Jonathan Taylor was going to get another contract. I think we were aware of that. But now that we know he has a 2-year deal, if I'm not mistaken, and I realize it's only been within the last couple of hours, so my numbers could be off here, but you correct me if I'm wrong, Eddie, but it is my understanding. Jonathan Taylor, who will turn 28 during the course of this NFL season, he will turn his jersey number, has a 2-year extension that is valued at $44 million.
Correct.
And $37 million of that is guaranteed.
You're close. 39 is guaranteed.
Okay. So now that 2-year extension begins, pardon my ignorance here, obviously he is in the last year of his contract, so he is contractually bound to the Colts for 3 more seasons, correct?
That is correct. This year and then 2 more.
This is the significance of this. Aside from the obvious, which is Jonathan Taylor's a Colt for 3 more years. I know that he is going to turn 28 this year, and I do think, so that means that under this contract, he will be 30 years old, soon to turn 31 when he's up for a new deal. And I think that that is kind of the magic number with running backs. Not to say that we have not seen running backs that have lasted beyond that. Well beyond that. I mean, Adrian Peterson, Derrick Henry, there are certainly players that you can look towards and say, look, there is precedent here. But more often than not, with running backs, roughly 30 is when the fall-off can begin. And Jonathan Taylor is a guy coming out of Wisconsin, if you recall, one of the storylines about him is the fact that he had a ton of carries at Wisconsin. There was already a lot of mileage on the tires, but kudos to him and credit to him, whether it's his conditioning, whether it's his mental approach, whether it's his – if you go back and think about Marvin Harrison, Monday Night Football in Tampa, the Monday Night Miracle. That Monday Night Miracle game, Keyshawn Johnson was mic'd up, and Keyshawn Johnson, while mic'd up on ABC, Marvin Harrison catches a pass early in the game. Tampa's up a couple scores. Keyshawn Johnson's feeling good about himself. Marvin Harrison catches a pass, runs 3 yards, scampers out of bounds. Keyshawn Johnson says, oh, is that how he gets his yards? Is that how he gets his yards? Whenever I go up against somebody from the class of 96, I always dominate, is what Keyshawn Johnson said. Colts come back to win that game. Marvin Harrison gets the last laugh. Marvin Harrison has a much longer career, partially because his career was extended, theoretically, by the avoidance of contact. Now, I'm not saying Jonathan Taylor's afraid of contact, but his bell cow move is, of course, the breakaway speed and then, probably getting out of bounds. He is not. That's why Derrick Henry is so impressive, because Derrick Henry is more Earl Campbell than he is Barry Sanders. And the wear and tear on one's body has to be immeasurable. But this is, for Jonathan Taylor, less about the avoidance of a longer-term deal because of a concern about potential drop-off, and more about the avoidance of a long-term deal simply because of the necessity of not committing beyond what is the known within the franchise and the way it's being run. Chris Ballard knows. Carly Ursay-Gordon knows. Shane Steichen knows. Jonathan Taylor knows. And notably, one would assume his representation know that this is a huge year for the Colts. A huge year for the Colts. What do, Eddie, when it comes to taking a vacation at work and buying your plane ticket for your vacation, the first step that you have to do is request the time off, correct?
Correct, yes.
You go into the station website, the company website, wherever it is that you work, and you submit for your time off. Then, after you submit the time off and someone says to you, so are you taking your vacation in December? What is your response after you submit the time off, but you have yet to buy the plane tickets? What do you say when someone says, are we going on this vacation? What is the next step after you submit the time off?
Securing the flight and everything, right?
Well, before that, once you request the days off, you have to wait until your request is granted and approved by your superior, right?
Unless you're Mark Dykton, you've just got so many they automatically have to approve it.
No, that's correct. But my point being, you can sit there and say, this is what we would love to have happen, but there are steps. And the next step is you have to make sure that the days are secured before you then go out and spend money on it. And in the case of the Colts here, when it comes to their running back situation, what the Colts just did is they basically said, yes, we will commit the money to make sure that this is an option for us, but we are avoiding the long-term, the multi-year, and I get it. I mean, as a third sign running back, usually a 2-year deal is about the 2 to 4 probably, but you don't go the 4 aspect of it because you don't know yet. You're waiting to see whether or not your time off is approved before you totally dive into the finances of it. And for the Colts, for Chris Ballard, he knows, and I'm sure Jonathan Taylor's representation said, we will do something, but we don't want to do a long-term deal because what happens if they have a disastrous season, they go 6-11, Chris Ballard and Shane Steichen are both fired. Now you have a GM that comes in, and he's got Jonathan Taylor for 2 years. There is not a GM or a head coach that wouldn't like to have Jonathan Taylor, but they may be going with an offensive set, an idea, a philosophy that totally gets away from the running back, where Jonathan Taylor then is saying, hey, I'm here, guys. And if that's the case, he only has 2 seasons before he can then, and at that point, maybe the mileage is being spared on the car, and so therefore he can still get yet another and a 4th contract somewhere else. But this allows the flexibility and the compromise from both standpoints, which is significant. That's what this comes down to. Yesterday, Eddie, let me tell you what happened. We talked about it during the show.
Please tell me Julie Rolash won.
So we did, as a fundraiser for the Indiana Repertory Theater, IRT, we played a game of horse. And it was Julie Rolash, works for Pacer Sports and Entertainment, formerly the Horizon League commissioner, myself, and I believe Rising the term you use? Maybe it was 7th grade. I'll give him credit and say rising 8th grader, meaning about to start the 8th grade. Ace Beetle. Can there be a better name than Ace Beetle?
There could be.
Who would
Actually,
you say?
there is.
Who would you say? Think about great musical quartets. You have Kiss with Ace Frehley. You have the Beatles, 2 different bands, right? But you get a greatness of one quartet, greatness of another quartet. Who would you say is the Ace Beatle? John Lennon or Paul McCartney?
Eddie Garrison. Duh.
Eddie Garrison.
Yeah, me. Yeah.
In what area are you a Beatle?
Every way.
You might be an Ace, but you ain't a Beatle. Okay? But Ace Beatle, different spelling than the actual band, the Beatles, but nonetheless, Ace Beatle was the participant going up against us in this game of horse. And we went down, we toured through, we got to go out and shoot baskets on the court at Gainbridge Fieldhouse. We went through the practice facility. We went through the Ascension St. Vincent practice facility. And then we went to the Fever practice court, or at least the one they're using now before they go over to their headquarters once it opens. And the order was, and Ace got to pick the order. So Ace went first, followed by Julie, followed by me. Okay? Now, I got to tell you, Ace Beatle was out there and I think Julie Rolash was out before her 7th shot. He's draining threes. He's hitting left-handers.
Had high hopes.
And so very quickly it came down between Ace and myself. Now, I'm telling you right now, if you are listening to this radio program and you plan on being in Indianapolis beyond just 2 years, maybe you're Jonathan Taylor and you're only on a 2-year deal. I don't know. Remember the name Ace Beatle from Park Tudor School. He will be eventually playing for Park Tudor High School, I would assume, unless he goes to a different high school. But he was an excellent ball handler, and he could shoot very proficiently from three-point range and the professional three-point range. And he's 12. And I think he had R when he knocked me out. He knocked me out on a left-handed reverse layup.
Yes. Thank you, Ace. Thank you for saving us. Thank you. Yes.
Ace got the win, man.
Shout out Ace. Let's go.
Really good player. Really, really good player.
Let's go. Yes.
Now, because of that, Eddie, I thought a lot about this, okay? I want to put something to bed. Although I probably will bring it back up again in the noon hour. And I'm a little bit hesitant in bringing it up because it enters into arenas that are far beyond my level of capability to both intellectually and compassionately understand. But I do think the time is now or here to mention this subject matter, and my apologies if it's too late, or my apologies if it's a delayed reaction. But I wanted to really think about it and make sure that I was speaking on it in hopefully a responsible fashion and not in a hot topic, hot take debating fashion. Yesterday, Sophie Cunningham, and we played the audio for you, kind of clarified or put to bed the topic of discussion regarding as she had made headlines towards. If you recall, a couple of weeks ago, it was very much in the headlines. And let me begin by saying this. If you're someone listening to the show and you've got your kids in the car, or there are subject matter that you feel is not prone to a sports talk show or a 10 a.m. show and whatever else, I totally understand and respect that. So I think the way that I'm going to address this and speak it is one that is still within the bounds of comfort and grace for everyone, hopefully. But it is a big enough news story within Indianapolis and within our franchise that we cover and one of its stars. The reality is, when this is a national talking point on the regular about sport, it is irresponsible perhaps for those of us that cover the team and the athletes to not address the elephant in the room. Sophie Cunningham, in what is and I don't have to explain to everyone the polarizing topic of transgendered people in sport, and notably in women's sport. I think everyone knows the hot button and the yin and the yang and of all of that. And Sophie Cunningham was asked for a print interview, and by print interview, I mean it wasn't like it was something where she was doing a podcast. She was asked in an interview that was then going to be written in written form several months ago about her thoughts on it, and to paraphrase her thought was, I think we should protect the integrity of women's sports by making sure that it is only women or those that were biologically born as such that are participating. But that comment was made well before the season began. Then once the Fever start the year, Caitlin Clark continues to be a big star, which then makes Sophie Cunningham a big star. There's more attention on Sophie Cunningham, and then the person who had done that interview is like, look what I have. Here's a big star. Here's what she had to say about this sensitive topic. And so once that quote was put out there, then it became a big talking point amongst news talk, sports talk across the country. And not everyone, but many people within the arena of that discussion were consistently discussing and debating back and forth the comment, the reaction to the comment, how the teammates should or should not handle it, and notably how Caitlin Clark should handle said comments, how the head coach Stephanie White should handle said comments. Did they say the right thing? Did they say the wrong thing? Yet Sophie Cunningham had not addressed the reaction to her comments until yesterday, when just about 24 hours ago, she did indeed address exactly that.
I think that there's so much good going on in the WNBA. I think that basketball is being played at the highest level it's ever been. I think our team in specific, we are breaking history right now with the amount of points that we're scoring on back-to-back games. I think the Minnesota game, there's just so much distraction. I think the WNBA media, all we ever do is cover everything except basketball. And it's like, what are we doing? There's so much. Like, you can talk about other things. I think those are great stories. I think it shows fans, who people are outside of the court. But I also think we got to keep the main thing. And I think when it comes to the Minnesota game, I think there's so much distraction. But like the matchup between Miles and Kelsey was phenomenal. Our team, that game in particular was a great game. And so I think that there's a lot to be said, and I'm going to let people just do the speaking for themselves. But for me, I want to get back to basketball. It's always been about basketball. That interview happened in February when I was asked a question. And so for me, I just want to, make sure that it stays, the focus stays where it should, because people are playing at such a high level. We have probably like 3 MVPs that could be MVPs on our team specifically. And so that's why I want to do that.
Okay. So to paraphrase that, Sophie Cunningham was saying was, in terms of my comments, time and place. And the place and the time in which I said that is not parallel with the time and the place in which you're asking me to elaborate. Now, with that, time and place. But enough people have asked me about it, and I do feel, and I've thought a lot about this, about whether or not, because it is a topic that people are very passionate about on both sides, and I understand and respect where both sides are coming from. It's a very complicated issue because a lot of issues become complicated when you can realistically see, there are a lot of things that if you were in high school debate class, you're like, oh, this is the easiest assignment ever because I have to defend point A, and no one in their right mind would defend point B. That would be really hard to have to be assigned to come up with the reasons to defend it. This is a different one because I think that there are very valid points on both sides. For what it's worth, only because people have asked me about it, I think with the WNBA, what you have that is tricky is the following. The WNBA is a league that does have, and nobody knows the specific number, but the reality is that it does have a percentage of its athletes that fall underneath the umbrella, if you will, of LGBTQ+, and I know that there are people that roll their eyes at the number of acronyms that get listed underneath that. But in that specification, oftentimes whenever you have a group of people that feel like they are marginalized, again, people can debate till the cows come home whether or not they are marginalized. I'm just telling you, when you have a group of people that feel that they are, then that group is more prone to have a compassion or a defense mechanism for others that are underneath the same umbrella of that feeling of marginalization. Whether those are void feelings or not are topics for a totally different show. But for that reason, the athletes of that league, when they are asked questions about a group of people that they may not fall into directly, but they are akin to in some area or societally speaking in the same category as, they are naturally going to feel an obligation to have to speak in the defense of that group. That can open a can of worms then of where do you draw the line as to who is or is not allowed, because are you opening now, and I know there are people that feel that just the smallest sliver of light that you allow into the WNBA or any league when you are making amendment to the rules of who is allowed to be in, then all of a sudden it's like water coming through, and the next thing you know, you have some former NBA player that just decides, I want to keep playing. And so he declares a certain feeling about himself, and now he's in the WNBA. That's the example people would give you, which sounds and one would expect is totally extreme and unreasonable. But I understand also why you have to be cautious of a slippery slope. I think, and I researched a lot about this and thought a lot about this, and it's not something that we need to make a whole show out of, but I think that it's worth pointing out. I've always been a believer in, one of my favorite cigars is the Henry Clay. I like the Henry Clay cigar, not necessarily because of the flavor of the Henry Clay, although it's a good cigar. But Henry Clay was the great compromiser, historically speaking. And I think in some areas there is a compromise that can be found and can be found fairly easily, but unfortunately in topics where people become passionate, ease is not always what they're looking for. But I think it is very fair to say that if you're talking about people that fall into that umbrella of what Sophie Cunningham was talking about, then the National Women's Sports Association, I hope I have that grouping correct in the name of it, but there is a council of sport for women in the United States. Billie Jean King is a part of it. And their platform has always been, and I think this is a very fair conclusion, that young people who are eventually become trans adults, inclusion indeed is important. Stephanie Whitehead said that, and I agree with it. Inclusion is important. But what also is important is how sports can teach you about life. And one of the things about life that sports teaches you is not every kid makes the team. Sometimes you get cut from the team and you've got to work harder to improve your jump shot or your batting percentage or whatever it may be the next year to try and make the team again. When you get onto the team, sometimes you have to deal with people that are totally different than you, that think different than you, that theologically are different than you, but you have a common goal together. For young people in any walk of life, in any interest level, it is so critically important, I think, for people between the ages of, say, 7 through high school, 15, 16, 17. That is such an important era and age for where you shape how you respond to adversity, how you respond to being different. And there is an importance in that era because it so much sets the foundation of who you are as a person and how much you believe in yourself, that I think the inclusion of allowing boys to play girls sports or girls to play boys sports at the age of 7, 8, 9 years old is acceptable. I coached a youth basketball team at the Pike YMCA that were 7 and 8-year-old kids, and I had a girl on the team who was probably as good as the boys. And there are certainly examples of boys that play gymnastics or volleyball before they were mainstream sports, and gymnastics always has been, but volleyball, for example, or other sports that are predominantly played by girls that boys want to play, and at 7, 8, 9, 10 years old, they do that because they want to experience something different. And there may be kids that are doing that for the reasons that we're talking about. But I think that a fair compromise would be to allow for that inclusion and allow for that to take place and allow for those athletes to participate in the sport that are made up or designed specifically for, as adults, biologically those that are born male or female, before that time period, in an adolescent era, before basically in a prepubescent era, I think you should be able to play when and where you'd like. Once you go through and the body goes through the period of the testosterone change, it's just like a grizzly bear. You can have a grizzly bear cub as your pet and bottle feed it until it goes through the chemical change that makes it an adult grizzly bear, and then it is overtaken by the chemical that makes it what it is. And there is a truth to the fact, undeniably, that that's realistically what happens. And Billie Jean King and her association say, once the body goes through those changes, then you go by what it is that you were at birth, genetically speaking. I think that's a fair compromise. And I think it's a fair compromise because what it does do is it allows inclusion and it allows the intermix of those two groups at the youngest, most formidable age, when kids are at the most important time of their vulnerability from a social standpoint of feeling included within areas that they otherwise may not. But at the same time, once you get to that age of young adulthood, it may not be to your liking of what, unfortunately, biologically, it says you are designed to do. But a big part of the sport and learning process at that age is learning that life is not always custom made for what it is that you want, but rather for what the team wants from you or for others. And that is an incredibly important lesson to learn that can be provided within that compromise that is designed, outlined, and verbalized by that association. And I think that's a fair compromise. And as for the Fever themselves, I think what you saw yesterday was Sophie Cunningham essentially saying, this is discussion and debate and analysis for another time and another place, because right now what we have is a basketball team that is taking on the Las Vegas Aces, hopefully not Ace Beetle because he's a really good shooter, but has a game tonight at 7 o'clock. Pregame can be heard right here at 6:30, and they're playing very, very well. And the focus should be on the way they're playing as opposed to who they prospectively years from now could be playing. It is a very, very small percentage of athlete you're talking about, less than 1/10,000th of a percentage within the NCAA, but I understand why the feeling is out there that you have to make it a clear definition before it then gets to a point where you now have all kinds of difficult decisions to be made in a polarizing topic. And that compromise, I think, handles exactly that. We come back, we'll get more into the Colts and something interesting happening, speaking of high school sports, on a totally different subject of it. And I appreciate everyone hearing out that. I just felt like it needed to eventually be said because it is a topic that is ubiquitous around sport and epicentered in Indiana, and maybe it is going away. But Sophie Cunningham kind of requested of, let's put a tie on this. And so I felt like to do that adequately, it needed to at least be discussed that, yes, in fact, we are intellectually aware of that discussion. But there is something that I saw yesterday, very interesting to me regarding high school sports and football. We'll get into that discussion coming up after the 11 o'clock hour. It is a Thursday. You're listening to Corey & Company, 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan.
This is Query and Company on 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan.
By the way, speaking of the Indiana Fever, I wouldn't say breaking news. This doesn't necessarily probably necessitate the breaking news sounder because it came out about a half an hour before we were on the air, at least officially speaking, although I don't know that it was a huge surprise. Aaliyah Boston and Caitlin Clark, congratulations to both being named to the USA Basketball World Cup roster for the games representing Team USA that will take place in September in Berlin.
Stephanie White will be an assistant coach on the staff too, Jake. So a lot of Fever representation coming your way in a few weeks.
That's cool, right? I mean, that's, again, all of it, though, there is the hope, and there has always been the hope and expectation that will translate into, is this a title contending franchise in the WNBA? And I'm not going to say dynasty, but one that should be around for a while. One would certainly hope that that is the case.
Also, Jake, with those two making it onto the FIBA roster, I'm fascinated in this regard because it is a 3-week portion where the WNBA is on hiatus. When those two come back, where are they at in terms of just their overall, like fatigue? Because they've already played, at that point, it's going to be around 40 games. And when they come back from the FIBA World Cup, they've got like 2, maybe 4 games left in the regular season, and then it's postseason time.
Yeah, excellent point.
And things are, jumbled up right now in the standings in the WNBA. Even though the Fever are 5th, I mean, they're 2 games out of 2nd, which is Las Vegas. So that's why tonight's game's important, and I think it's also majorly important to show the rest of the WNBA that you can win a season series against a team like the Vegas Aces.
Eddie, I recall when I was in college, so Alan Henderson played at Indiana, one of the great players, I think the most underrated player in the history of Indiana basketball. But Alan Henderson, and maybe I'm biased on this just because I knew Alan when we were in school and he was my class, and I went to elementary school with him, and then he went to Orchard and Brebeuf after that. But when we were in college, I recall when I was interning in New York City and the Goodwill games were going on. Now, I don't know where the Goodwill games were being played in 1994, but my mind tells me that it was somewhere, if I had to guess, Turkey is coming to mind, but somewhere Europe, I think.
What year was this?
1994 Goodwill games. And Allen was on Team USA.
Held in St. Petersburg, Russia.
Russia, okay. So, for whatever reason, I just remember, and this is very simplistic in the way to put it, but I remember as a young athlete and as a young basketball player, notably, driving into school before school for practices before school, and then, after when there was a time where you had to do it during winter break, they replicated the school schedule so that we would practice at 7:20 in the morning. So you're driving to school at like 6:30. And like I said, during the season, if we had morning practices, I think we started at 6:30. We'd practice, do shoot-arounds for 45 minutes or something. And just those long winter nights in the car, and you're driving there, but you're, and I thought about, even on a Goodwill Games team, or in this case, the FIBA, the World Cup of basketball. It's not the Olympics. I mean, the Olympics is the gold standard, I guess, pardon the pun. But when you really think about it, and then you think about, okay, so how many kids are getting up in the morning and driving in the back of a wood-paneled station wagon at 6:30 in the morning and picking up somebody else on their way there and carpooling? How many players are going into the gym and putting up an extra 500 shots and doing it before first period algebra across the country, from Missoula, Montana to Murfreesboro, Tennessee, to Muskegon, Michigan, to Midland, Texas. And yet, like 12 of them get to do that for a jersey that says United States of America? I mean, that has to be – I know that when you are a great player in a great career, neither of which applies to me, but you would like to think that even a Caitlin Clark or an Aaliyah Boston or an Alan Henderson who played in great moments and great games at great programs, when they put the jersey on, can stop to think about just the honor that is that. And the same is true in the World Cup with soccer. When you watch the American team, I mean, you're like, look, say what you want about soccer and the number of kids that are playing soccer now, though, and that's the group that gets to put on that crest and go out there and represent this country in the biggest sporting event in the world. It's pretty darn cool.
Jake, do you have anything going on Saturday?
Yeah, I'm going to be in Portland, Oregon.
Really?
Yes. This
Wow.
Saturday?
Yeah.
Yes.
What you doing in Portland, Jake?
You will not see me on Monday. I don't know if they put out the email yet. I put in for a day off.
Excuse me?
Yeah. I submitted for a day off request like 4 months ago when the IndyCar schedule came out because I'm coming back on a red eye, and I thought, you know what? I'm taking a Jake day.
What's a Jake day?
Laying by the pool. It's a day. I mean, if it's a day for me, it's a day of you know, soaking in sexy is what it is.
Okay.
But, I mean, honestly, if we're being frank, right?
Sure.
But, yes, I believe that I'm off on Monday. I haven't seen an email on that yet. Have you not heard that yet?
No, that's news to me.
I did look, and it says that my day off was approved. This just in. Eddie
Jake
is
Query
hosting Monday.
out Monday.
I don't. Maybe I'm not. I don't know.
Eddie Garrison walks into an empty studio and has to scramble last minute.
Listen, it might be a sleep deprivation Monday.
And has to host for 3 hours.
I land at
unprepared.
5:30 in the morning. Okay, I mean, I'm happy to do it. If you want me to come in, I'll do it. But it'll be wonky.
The reason why I was asking about Saturday, Jake, because I want to give a shout out to Brandon here. Mudsock Fest schedule, that is on. This is for Saturday in Pendleton, Indiana. He was just asking if we could give him a nice little shout out. So yeah, the Mudsock schedule is starts at 9:00 with some breakfast. There's an all-day fishing contest. They've got all sorts of stuff going on. Food trucks.
They have music too, don't
Silent
they?
auctions, yes. A silent disco.
Yeah.
A cornhole tournament, or people call it bags. I don't know what world you live in when you call it bags, but yeah, lots of stuff going on Saturday at Pendleton.
When you play cornhole, I've asked this before, is there a specification in cornhole that it has to be underhand?
It's a good question. I don't know.
Would you want to play cornhole with Steph Curry?
Do you have to
Honestly,
throw bags
I've never heard this
underhand
clarified.
in cornhole?
I think they have like a cornhole championships on ESPN 8.
Oh yeah, they do. Great stuff. Usually there's a Hoosier rep.
There's like Will Haskett does the broadcast for that. Or Rakestraw. One of those two. I'm being totally serious.
You have to throw underhand. Yes, that is an
You
official
do have to
rule.
throw underhand?
Yes.
Okay. Fair enough.
By the American Cornhole Association. Yes, the ACA, as we call it.
Yeah. But no, it's the ACHA, right?
No, the ACA.
Gotcha. There's a lot of bless yous going on around there when people say the name of the organization.
I don't think there's bless yous going on, Jake.
I'm John with Atcha. Bless you. Yeah, thank you. But I'm with Atcha. Okay, when we come back, I did mention this. We're going to have somebody on at 11:30, but I've been hearing for a while about something with youth sports and how it impacts the high school level. And I've wondered for a while if we weren't eventually going to have the story that I'm about to tell next. And maybe it's a one-off, maybe it's the anomaly, or maybe it's the new norm. I'll explain what I mean, and I'll do it next. Hey there, Jake Ford for Surfside. Look for the can with the sunset. Day like today, overcast. Guess what? Sunshine's right there with the crack open of a can of a Surfside. I'm talking about iced tea with a splash of vodka, lemonade with the splash of vodka, and all of it. Just 100 calories, 2 grams of sugar. So smooth to enjoy. That's what you get from Surfside. Surfside has a variety of flavors. You can do a variety pack. You can buy individually. Look for it wherever you buy your favorite adult beverages. Surfside. Look for the can with the sunset stripes. Please be 21 and please consume responsibly.
This is Query and Company on 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan.
You know, on these microphones, we have what's called I think it's called a windscreen or a microphone. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I typically bring my own, right? I don't necessarily need to be mugging up on something that Kevin was talking to for all morning, right?
Yeah.
I'm not sure he brushes his teeth in the morning, right? And I don't blame him. I mean, he's got to be here at like 6 in the morning.
Well, we know he doesn't shower.
But
and he has anti-bathroom in the backyard.
Correct. But not anti-diving into a portalette, which is weird.
Yeah, I know.
But nonetheless, my windscreen, I moved it into the other studio the other day because I had another obligation. And I forgot to bring it back in. So I'm operating so far here in the first hour of this program without the windscreen. Now, does my voice sound different?
No.
Everything sounds okay?
Yep.
Okay,
How does it make you feel?
Raw. Right?
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Huh.
A little more sensitive. I was the other day scrolling on the Book of Faces, which I don't do so much anymore because I don't know if you've noticed this or not, Eddie. It's a theory I have here of the internet, the dead internet theory. And there's a lot of truth. Like anytime that I go on social media now, and I know there are a billion different sites, and Facebook makes me sound like I'm 80. I realize that. But don't flash your lights at cars on the interstate. It's a gang ritual, and they'll follow you down and kill you. I saw it on Facebook. That kind of thing, right?
Sure.
But I was looking through it because, whatever. And I saw an interesting post from Elwood. Now, I don't know a lot about Elwood. I should know more about Elwood than I do because my name's Jake, so one would assume that I know a lot about Elwood, right? I know that Elwood's a community just north of Indianapolis. I know that that's where red gold ketchup is made. And I know that, if I'm not mistaken, now, Eddie, you would know better than I because you do a lot more with high school athletics and, just from sports to Indiana Sports Talk and those such things. I believe, and I don't want to misquote it here if this is not accurate, but I believe that Elwood, in terms of wins and losses on the football field, has struggled over the years, correct?
I would have to look.
I think that's right. I could be wrong. But for years, I have been hearing, and I think a lot of people have been hearing for years, about football and concussions and just the game itself. And we'd have to go back 20 years ago. 20 years ago, I was doing the morning show at WIBC. Dan McClelland was the producer. Terry Stacy, myself, Jeff Pigeon in the mornings. And we would get pitched a lot. That's a radio term. We would get offered from different people. Hey, Bill Smith has a new book out about, kite flying. Would you like to have Bill on? It's kite flying season. It's going to be windy in April. If so, you come in and record them. And we had a doctor in 2007, probably, that was, I think, out of Boston. And he had written a book about concussions in football and the dangers of concussions in football and the dangers in the NFL of like this Russian roulette that players were playing neurologically. And so we recorded an interview with this individual. And I remember every answer when I would ask a question, he would begin the answer with, yes, please, thank you. And then he would start talking. And he was from, I believe, Nairobi. Beautiful perspectives, really bright guy, super charming, nice, a really good interview, except for the fact that he kept saying, yes, please, thank you. And his accent, he was kind of hard to understand. And so I remember, I think we did maybe air the interview, but we kind of dismissed it. Okay. Well, he turned out to be the leading neurologist that the movie, what was the movie with Will Smith? I think it was called Concussion.
Concussion, yeah.
It was that doctor. And that was really kind of the beginning of the frontier, if you will, of this new frontier. It was the first time that I'd really gotten on the covered wagon of knowing of this awareness about football and its potential dangers. And I love football. I love everything about it. It's a beautiful sport. But it is, as Bill Polian says, a collision sport, not a contact sport. And at that time, I started hearing more of, that's why kids are playing soccer, because parents are worried about the head injuries. And that's why you're seeing more kids playing things like lacrosse, which in itself has plenty of head injuries and that sort of a thing. But I started hearing about all of these sports that were going to eventually rival football. And I'm reading through the Book of Faces the other day, and I see a plea, basically a plea, from an athletic director of an Indiana high school that's like, look, we had our opening day of football practice, and we had 12 kids. 12. We don't have enough kids for a football team. Please, if you are a student at Elwood High School, there's so much that we can teach you about. You don't have to be a fan of football. We can teach you the game, but we can teach you the importance of teamwork and footwork and camaraderie and work ethic and all of the things that you can learn in the beauty of high school sport. But it begins with simply committing to playing football and representing your school. And I don't know if that's because, maybe it's strictly because Elwood hasn't been very good. Maybe it's because there are kids at Elwood that don't like the color scheme. Maybe it is that somebody at Elwood came up with an awesome after-school sock hop program. I have no idea. But I And maybe those things are all true. But I thought I'd like to have on their head coach because they're still trying to put together a program. And I wanted to have on their head coach to discuss the selling feature of trying to sell to kids today, because I think there are a lot of layers to this onion. I think that we now have, and I'm not trying to sound like that guy, but I think people with young kids, parents with kids will understand what I mean by this. We live in a world now where young people are so much more reliant on their device than they are communication, than they are being put in uncomfortable situations than they are of testing themselves, but not also just grasping and understanding the value of the team concept of team sport. And so for all of those reasons, I wanted to talk to Seth, I believe it's Morellis, who's the head coach at Elwood, and ask him, how do you build a program when you don't have enough kids for the roster? And is this a football thing? Is this a generational thing? Is this an attention span thing? I think it's an interesting glimpse into high school athletics and high school socialization today. But I might also be overthinking it, and so at 30 minutes after the hour, he can tell me exactly that. Big news for the Colts, big news for the Fever. We'll get into both next.
It's Query and Company.
I'm going to be keeping you company for the next few hours.
You are not going to believe the company.
This company.
You're going to bankrupt your mama's company?
At least I have the radio to keep me company.
On 93.5 and 107.5, The Fan.
11 o'clock on a Thursday. Specifically speaking, it is 2 minutes after the hour of 11 o'clock. My name is Jake Query. Eddie Garrison, the other voice you hear on this program.
How do you do?
It is, I'm well, thank you. Query and Company here on 93.5 and 107.5, The Fan.
I guess I'll just stop asking that.
Why is that?
Well, I asked you how you were doing. You know, if you were a polite human being, you would ask it back. Oh, hey, I'm good. How are you, Eddie? But you're not a polite human being, so.
I don't know about that. I think I'm a polite fella.
No.
You know, if you were a polite fella, you wouldn't interject and interrupt the guy that's talking, right?
You welcomed me. You said Eddie Garrison is the other voice that you're here or whatever. And I was like, good evening. How are you? And I was familiarizing the audience with the voice.
I just simply said Eddie is the other voice you hear.
Yep. So I talked. I was called upon.
No, I think if I would have said Eddie Garrison's the other voice you hear in this program, Eddie, speak. Right? Like if I have the little thing and I'm like, I grind the little organ.
Are you talking about a Jack in the Box?
Yeah. Are you the little fella that sits beside me and?
You know, we have such great chemistry, Jake. I just waited for you to stop talking.
That's right. Well, did you notice? To be fair, kidding aside, I did kind of wait. I didn't pay attention to what you said, though. Did you say you're okay?
I didn't tell you how I was doing because you didn't ask.
You could have interjected. Thanks, Jake. I'm wonderful today. How are you? That's how exactly did you say it? You asked how I was?
I said hello, Jake. Or I said, I can't remember what I said now.
I just think when I heard the part of how are you.
I guess I didn't say, hey, Jake, how you doing?
Go ahead. I think that when I think I heard you say, how are you? And so I just assumed that meant that you had led that by saying how you were. And then, you know what I mean? Because I wasn't
trying
paying
to be
attention.
nice and asking how you were feeling. But okay.
Well, Jonathan Taylor's feeling good, I can tell you that, because he has a new deal with the Colts. This is a 2-year, $44 million contract. We found that out earlier today. $39 million of that is guaranteed. And to repeat what I said earlier, but I'll try to do it in more succinct fashion, I think that this deal for Taylor appeases both sides, which is good. But I think it also, in terms of, one would presume, the way that it was negotiated or what was settled upon, would lead you to believe that everyone knows the reality, and the reality is the unknown. Because Jonathan Taylor will turn 28 years old in January. Typically, the magic number for a running back is 30. Not to say you're not a productive running back after 30. Emmitt Smith was. Derrick Henry is. Adrian Peterson was. Frank Gore was. LaDainian Tomlinson was. But those guys are anomalies, number one. And number two, I don't know that they were home run hitting backs at that age. But they were still playing. And when you look at the Colts situation, and I agree with Kevin Bowen on this, one thing that Kevin and I have agreed on, because I heard him talking about it this morning. The Colts have had Jonathan Taylor long enough, and maybe the Colts are the one that actually started to turn this corner for the league in a copycat league. But Jonathan Taylor has been a great player for the Colts, and Jonathan Taylor has been a great draft pick by Chris Ballard. If I'm Chris Ballard, I have it atop my resume. Drafted Jonathan Taylor and not even in the first round, because he is one of, if not the best players at his position in the National Football League. Quentin Nelson was a great pick. He was. Matter of fact, if I'm not mistaken, they dropped back like 2 spots because they knew he'd be there. And he is you remember when he was drafted, what Jim Irsay said? Quentin, man, you remind me like John Hamm out there, just killing guys and stuff, and you'll be here a long time. And he's been a great player and will be here a long time. But what has having the best guard and what has having a top 3 running back in the NFL done for the Indianapolis Colts in the last 8 seasons? What's it done for them? There is an element of truth to the fact that having Quentin Nelson and Jonathan Taylor at the time in which they were acquired on your roster was the equivalent in 2026 in the NBA of being excited about the fact that you have Sam Cassell and Mark Eaton. Maybe maybe Allen Iverson's better because Taylor is an elite level talent. But point guard and big space eating shot blocking center, while very important in today's NBA, the league has gone away from, and Jalen Brunson's this guy's an idiot. Jalen Brunson's the MVP of the NBA Finals. What's he talking about? I get it. But I'm saying the hard-nosed lockdown, strictly distributing point guard that is not necessarily a scorer, and the low block rebounding shot blocking center that is not necessarily a scorer or an above the rim pick and roll guy, the league has gone away from that a bit. And that's what running back and guard felt like at the time that those guys were acquired. Now, where you have to give the Colts credit, if you were assigned to defend Chris Ballard in that decision, is we are now in a cyclical copycat league. I covered the Rams in The Greatest Show on Turf. I mean, I saw it. Kurt Warner, what was the big narrative about Kurt Warner? Kurt Warner went from 3 things that everyone in America knew about Kurt Warner at the turn of the 21st century. 1, that he worked at a grocery store. 2, that he played in the Arena League in Iowa. And 3, that he had a quick release. And that he was there by happenstance because Trent Green went down. And that turned Dick Vermeil and then later Mike Martz turned the NFL on its ear because they had an Arena League quarterback that because he played in the Arena League and it was a smaller field and defenses could get to him faster, he was boom, boom, boom in his release time, and he had weapons galore. Azakim, you've heard me talk about it. I just mentioned him the other day. They were throwing the ball all over the place. And before you knew it, everybody in the NFL was trying to replicate that. Everybody was trying to play in this fast-paced, and, man, we got to get a quarterback that's got the quick release, and the running back became almost devalued. And then they had Marshall Faulk as well, right? But they were using him as a receiver. It's a copycat league. The fast-paced, fly it out, air it out league, and then now we're back to, and maybe it is Jonathan Taylor that is a large responsibility for this. But the reality is that when you look at the Colts and you look at this offense, it is Jonathan Taylor has been the one consistent, and the rest of the league now, what did we see 2 days ago? Bijan Robinson gets a ton of money from Atlanta. Saquon Barkley is a huge critical piece in Philadelphia. When you have fantasy football drafts now, they're actually earlier on in your draft is that run on running backs. So credit to the Colts that they might be the one that has started to turn that corner and valuing the running back again because they have one of the best in the NFL. But with that, a 2-year deal. He has 1 year left on his contract. This locks him in for 3 more seasons. Why no more than 2? If he's that elite, Jake, and he's only 28 years old, he still has, and theoretically, he's going to have mileage on the tires beyond the age of 30. Why would they not try to lock him in even further? And the answer is simple. Very clearly, I would assume that Jonathan Taylor's representation, who played hardball in the last contract and obviously were much more negotiable this time, but I'm guessing they probably favored it as a short-end deal on 2 years because Jonathan Taylor's no fool. His agent's no fool. Chris Ballard's no fool. They all know that it comes down to this year. It doesn't for Jonathan Taylor now. He's got $39 million guaranteed and 2 more years beyond this one on his contract. But Jonathan Taylor knows that if the Colts go 7-10, 8-9, 9-8, if they miss the playoffs, even if they make the playoffs as a wild card and lose, it is very possible. I'm not going to say likely. I'm not even going to go so far as to say probable. But it's very possible that Chris Ballard is out at the end of the year in those circumstances. If Chris Ballard's out at the end of the year, then it is on the table that Shane Steichen is out at the end of the year. And then you bring in new GM, new head coach, new system. What does that mean for the running back? Well, they got a running back that's good enough that probably in any system he's going to get his yards. But what we see right here before our very eyes is indeed the tangible proof that even the running back knows that the long term is not guaranteed in terms of what it is that he would be asked to do here. So it was a smart play to get that 2-year deal. And then one of two things happens. As he is getting ready to turn 31, he either is coming off of another remarkable season and Chris Ballard and Shane Steichen have the Colts right there where they need to be. The pass rush is really good. Daniel Jones has stayed healthy and turned into what we thought he was going to be when they were 8-2. And life's good. Bada boom, bada bing. Jonathan Taylor, there's nowhere else for him to be but here. Seth McGowan, their backup's been playing really well, but you know what? Jonathan Taylor, he's got 2 more years left in the tank. He's an important piece. We're right on the cusp of a Super Bowl. Let's go ahead and sign him. There we go. Or new GM, new head coach. Jonathan Taylor's like, I ain't happy. This guy's running an offense I don't like. This guy's not featuring me. Our line is breaking down, and this new GM doesn't seem to know how to fix it. I'm not happy here at all. Well, good news. You're only there in that situation for 2 seasons. So he's not bound beyond the abyss, if you will. You know, I remember, my oh my, how times have changed. But I remember when Eric Dickerson, one day I'm working at Channel 6 and I'm hanging out late, and I used to go, and one of the things that I did, and maybe it's a sad documentation of my social life, but when you get off work at 11:30 after the late news and then you tape the stuff for the morning and you get everything ready for the morning, usually I would leave work at about 12:15. And so a lot of times it was like, what's the difference between 12:15 and 3 a.m.? I would go down in the basements and the bowels of Channel 6, and I could tell you, you name a sporting event right now off the top of your head or a news event of Indianapolis within its lore up until the year 2005, and I can tell you exactly where the tape is that exists with the archive footage of that in WRTV's archives, at least before they were, I assume that building still is the same. But I would sit and pull stuff that was of interest to me, and I was watching one raw tape, as we call it, of the 88 NFL season. And Eric Dickerson, it was after a game, and Dickerson's walking off the field, and he's carrying his helmet, and he looks right at the camera. And he says, 13 carries. They gave me 13 blankety-blank carries, and I'm getting $1 million a year. And then he laughs. $1 million a year they're paying me to carry the ball 13 times. It was astronomical to think that a running back was getting $1 million a year back then. But more so, he was the biggest star in sport, and he wanted out. And when Eric Dickerson, as the biggest star in sport, wanted out, it absolutely, seismically sank everything the Colts were trying to do. They ended up with an I remember The Sports Illustrated cover, One Happy Camper with Eric Dickerson. That could not have been any further from the truth. Could not have been any further from the truth. He was one unhappy camper almost entirely from the time he got here. And he held out, and he was a diva. Great player. One of my all-time favorites. And even though he's a huge fan of Eric Dickerson, a pretty good dude. But, and I can't blame him for being a fan of Eric Dickerson, right? Having said that, he then holds out. Rick Venturi suspends him, and it spiraled everything. And what the Colts did today masterfully is they came up with a plan that allows them to continue and carry on with their running back, but alleviate and avoid any potential for that sort of a situation. And the other difference being now Jonathan Taylor would be walking off the field saying, $22 million. They're paying me $22 million for 13 carries. Aaliyah Boston, Caitlin Clark have been named to the World Basketball Cup. Is that right, Eddie? Team USA, I know that.
FIBA?
The FIBA, is this the same as the World Basketball Championships?
I believe so. USA Basketball. That's all I know. For the FIBA World Cup.
I recall when the World Basketball Championships were here. That's one of my great mysteries of life. One of the great mysteries of life to me will always be, and I still have the bag. It's a super cool duffel bag. The 2000 World Basketball. It was either 2000 or 2002. I think it was 2002 World Basketball Championships. And it was amazing. It was amazing. I think it was a FIBA event, the World Cup of Basketball, Lucas Oil Stadium, Gainbridge Fieldhouse, Team Argentina with Manu Ginobili and Hedo Turkoglu and Team Turkey and Peja Stojakovic on team, I think he was, gosh, I hate to say this, was he Slovakia or maybe even Yugoslavia at that time was still, those countries have broken. But it was amazing. And there were literally, Baron Davis, I think Reggie Miller was on the team. There were like 35 people at each game. It was one of the biggest flops in the history of this town of events we've put on, and I've never understood why. I've never understood why it was, because it was amazing. But I think that's what this is, the same event, but on the women's side. But Caitlin Clark, Aaliyah Boston, representing Team USA. Stephanie White will be an assistant for it. Yesterday, and I'll probably get into it again in about an hour or so, Sophie Cunningham's comments yesterday, but basically what she was saying is it's time to get back to basketball. Let's quit talking about all the extracurricular stuff. Time to get back to basketball. And that begins tonight, Eddie, 7 o'clock, Las Vegas Aces. And
yes, sir.
This is a very good team, but also a very good team that matchup-wise really does favor Indiana.
Yeah, I remember that last matchup, Jake. It was the only matchup that they've played. I guess they've only played twice, but in that meeting, it was the final game of a 4-game or a 5-game. I think it was 4 West Coast trip that started with a nasty loss to the Los Angeles Sparks, and then they went on a Segababa against the Phoenix Mercury. Second night of back-to-back.
Okay.
Second game of a back-to-back, yeah. Cool kids say it.
Yeah.
And then they had a win against Vegas in there. Actually, 2 wins against Vegas. But in that second meeting, Aaliyah Boston absolutely dominated Asia Wilson. And that was one of the first times in, at least in the short, 2 years that I've really dived into and watched the Indiana Fever 3 years, where we have seen a player outperform Asia Wilson in the way that Aaliyah Boston did in that matchup. So I'm fascinated to see, can she do it again tonight? Does Asia Wilson come with an extra chip on her shoulder? And it would be the third win in the 3-game series if the Fever are able to top the Aces tonight. Of course, they're coming off a couple days off after their game, what was that, Monday night? Yeah, Sunday. So they've had some time to rest. Hopefully they are able to put together a much better showing than they did against Minnesota Sunday afternoon.
Yeah, I think they, again, there has been a lot of, I always use the term external noise, probably the wrong way of saying it, but, and I'm going to get into it in a little bit, but I think yesterday, Sophie Cunningham's comments of, look, at this, I think it's become a lot for all of them. You know, debate is exhausting. Defending oneself and explaining oneself is exhausting. I think that oftentimes success is found in simplicity. I go back to one of my favorite quotes of all time. And that is, it's been a month since I've referenced it, so I'll reference it again. Juan Montoya, when I was interviewing him after I think it was a qualifying run, and I asked him a question about the psychology of the Indianapolis 500 because I'd heard the story about him the first time that he ever went to Indianapolis. He took the bus tour, and then he took a second lap of it, not because he loved the voice of the guy that does the narration of it, because that was before that the current voice was there. But he took a second lap on the bus tour, and he sat up towards the front and asked the bus driver to drive it towards the outside of the track. And he crouched down and he looked at the outside line. And I asked him about that once, and he explained exactly that. And then I asked him how he was able to take that, what he learned from it, and then apply it and apply different races and situations from one race to the next over the course of his career. And I asked what his secret was, Juan Montoya, in being such a cerebral race car driver with such a natural feel and gift. And he said to me, my favorite quote probably of all time of athletes I've interviewed. And he said, you know, you just don't overthink it. Just don't overthink it. And I think that in sport and in life in general, sometimes when you don't overthink it is where success can be found. And so in that vein, when it comes to the Fever and all of the outside noise going on, I think their success most is going to come when they don't have to overthink it and they can just go play. And I don't know, unfortunately, they're not the ones that really get to determine when those conversations are muted. They're doing their best in terms of the off-court stuff. But we'll see whether or not that allows them that freedom to find simplicity in going back to just playing basketball tonight and whether they get that win. Elwood, you heard me talking about high school football. I think something happening up there, I want to dive into this because I think it represents a number of things just about youth sports today and building something when, in fact, you have to start simplistically. We'll explain with their head coach next.
You're listening to Query and Company on 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan.
Sam Morellis is in his third year as the head football coach of the Elwood Panthers, home of red gold tomato ketchup, by the way. And I was scouring the other day on social media, and I saw basically the posting from the athletic director saying, look, we are in need here of players. We are in jeopardy of not being able to field a football team. And they had a great response to that, but I thought it perhaps could kind of illustrate a number of different things today with high school athletics. And I can always have an appreciation for people that are working very hard and putting in their time to simply help kids learn about life in general via the world of sport, and letting them know, hey, we can teach you more than just the game here. And I wanted to know where things stood with it and just kind of dive into this. So Coach Morellis joins us right now on the Schwab Men's 2-in-1 hotline. Coach, how are you?
I'm doing good today.
Hey, I appreciate you joining us. Let's begin with this. I saw that on your opening day of practice. So before we get to where things stand right now, when you guys opened practice, as I understand it, you had like maybe a dozen kids that showed up for football. Take me through, if you could, kind of that opening practice and whether or not you did understand the realities of the forecast of what your numbers were going to be.
Well, when we started, we had 12, and you really can't do much with 12. We can't break off. My line coach, he only had like 2 kids. What do you do with 2 kids? We're breaking off in groups, so we really couldn't break off much into groups. But, I know we had 12, but I knew there was more people out there just waiting to show up. So it's just really a wait in progress. But, everybody starts their scrimmages next Friday. And, when you haven't broke out of the huddle yet, you're kind of in a crunch.
What do you and so how many do you have now? I mean, you began practice when? What was the opening day of practice?
Yeah, 12. We started Monday and we had 12, but last night we were up to 17 kids. And I know a few kids still have their physicals yet. So we're around 21, and once everybody comes out, 21, 22, I think. So that's okay. We'll deal with that.
And here's the thing, Coach. The potentially heartbreaking thing about it is those 21, 22 kids, right? They deserve the right to be able to play, to compete, to learn the game, to practice, all the things that go into it above and beyond trying to win a conference and those things, right?
Right.
So I think everyone would be pulling for you in that regard, right? It goes without saying. Right. What would you initially say? And I know, and numbers are a part of this, Coach. You're in your third year as the head coach of the Panthers. And, wins have been scarce, admittedly, for Elwood over the years, and there's a number of factors that go into that. I mean, numbers would be a big part of that. But is that the overriding reason? I mean, or is this actually an illustration of a generation that is getting away from football and getting interested in different sports aside from that of the pads of football?
Well, different sports, I think it's just not Elwood that's hurting for numbers. There was a few other schools that have closed already, having low numbers. Technology these days, it's easier to play online video games. I'll play football at home instead of going out and busting your butt and doing the real thing. The youth sports too. I think the youth sports are hurting for kids. They don't realize how fun sports is. Just get out there and try this. So,
is there an element to it also, Coach, of, and I can understand this, but the travel sports in the off-season, the summertime travel, right? And I don't know if this is the case as much. I would assume it is for kids all over the state of Indiana, where whether it be travel baseball, travel basketball, those are the two big ones. But are you seeing the potential, Coach? Sam Morellis is my guest here from Elwood. Are you seeing the possibility or the potential that kids are taking the fall off, maybe even because they have spent the entire off season in a different sport, doing the travel, going to different places, staying in hotels, and now it's like rest time before you get into the winter version of that, and et cetera. Is that putting a hurt in it?
I think so. We have had a Babe Ruth league here in Elwood, and we opened up middle school baseball, and everybody started playing that. And by the time that was over, then now our Babe Ruth league has collapsed. They don't have enough kids playing in the Babe Ruth league. So we have a lot of kids playing travel ball too. Travel ball is good. I don't have nothing against travel ball. That's good competition. But you're playing every weekend, traveling every weekend, and it does get kids tired.
Let me throw something at you here, Coach. Sam Morellis is my guest. He's the head coach at Elwood football. And they've got – and you say you got like 21 right now, you think, once everybody gets their physicals in, right? 21?
Yes.
Ideally, you'd like to have – I mean, I know ideally you'd like to have 70, right? But, I mean, in a perfect world, you would need at minimum – what's the minimum number you would need to be able to say, okay, now I can field a team and not have everybody going both ways and I can keep kids healthy? What number are you looking at?
I would like to have about 35 kids. So, but like we're telling our kids, our numbers are low, so a lot of kids are going to go both ways. So,
well, here's my question, and I'm not trying to lead down the wrong garden path of an answer, but let me give you my observation, and then I want you to tell me if I'm the dumbest guy you've ever talked to. Okay.
Okay.
I think to an extent, at its core, Coach, high school sports is about, and sports in general, is about teamwork. It's about working with a guy that you used to see in the hallway and you don't really know him, and you come from two totally different sides of the tracks, and everything about life you see differently. But in between those lines, you've got to work with one another, and he's got to do his job, and you got to have his back, or else your goal is not going to be met as well. And the camaraderie of that, the teamwork aspect of that, the ability to see in September that you're better at something than you were in August, the ability to understand that sometimes the official is going to make a call you don't agree with, but you've got to respond to the next play. There are so many lessons in life that exist within that I feel like we have gotten away from that, and we are prioritizing for young people the wrong things. And so they look at it and say, if I don't know that I'm going to go out and win 70% of the games, I'm just not going to go out there. And I feel like we've got, and maybe that's always been the case, but it seems to me now more than ever that we've lost our way a little bit on what the core principles should be. True or false?
True. Elwood struggled, winning games, past, 10 years. We've struggled. And I, like you said, I know kids are thinking, why should I go out there and throughout the summer and not win a bowl game?
And so what do you say to that? When they say that to you, when a kid comes to you and says, why should I go out there and play if I may not win a ball game?
I think it's, you're building a team, building a relationship with your teammates, so once you do graduate, you remember what you did back in the high school days, and your football teammates, you can talk the games you played in the rest of your life, so I really think, it's a big team bonding with each other.
What, for you personally, Coach, I'm sure it's frustrating, right? And I know some schools, in Texas, for example, they have places where they go 5-on-5, or in Kansas, I think they have 5-on-5 football, at 7-on-7 at some places. There's flag football. There are different variations of it. Are we getting to a point in Indiana where they need to maybe come up with alternate areas so that kids can still enjoy the game of football, but it is not necessarily the same requirement that at an Elwood that it would be at a Warren Central?
Which I think that there is like 11-on-11 around the state, but there's just not anywhere close to Elwood. I think we'd have to go up like the Fort Wayne area and Indianapolis area. So that'll be a lot of traveling for us.
Right.
So, it might, our neighbor, like Tri Central, I know they were low on numbers this year. And, so, they would go with 11 kids and we would go with 11 kids. So there's two teams right there. And, Wabash up north from us, they were struggling. So, Greenwood Christian, I heard they canceled. So, I think it's, maybe eventually that there'll be more teams that might go to 11-on-11.
Okay, here's a really dumb question as well. Could you actually, and I don't know what the IHSAA, this might be a better question for Paul Neidig, but could you as a school, if you got to a point where the alternative was to not have football as a program, and let's say one of your neighboring schools, rival schools for that matter, was in the same situation, would you be allowed to combine rosters and have basically a community team as opposed to just, you see what I'm saying there?
Oh, I don't know if IHSA would allow that.
Right.
But, I'd be okay with it.
I'll bet, right?
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, if you've got 21 kids and a neighboring school has 17 kids, now all of a sudden you got a roster of 38 and you're kind of learning as well, the importance and the value of getting together with your neighbor for a common goal and putting differences aside. You know what I mean? There's some values that can be had within that. But things get underway for you. You said, is it this Friday where you've got basically scrimmages, jamboree, that kind of thing?
Next Friday. Everybody, all the high schools start next Friday, scrimmage.
So basically you're combing around passing out flyers in the hallway still, right?
Yep, still at it. Yeah.
Shake every tree and find every kid you can get, right?
Yeah. Well, we're trying. So.
Well, I'll tell you what, Coach. I'm going to make a pledge, man. I'm going to come up for a game. Whatever number of kids you have, I'm going to come up for a game. We're going to keep an eye on it, and we're going to try to get, obviously can't get kids from outside Elwood that are going to go up there and play for you. But I think it's a story that people can rally around, and I just find it interesting because I think you're right. The devices, I hate to say it this way, Coach, but the declining socialization for young people, I think, is something that even in the smallest of areas, it is recognizable. And unfortunately, am I correct in saying this kind of represents exactly that to a degree?
Yes. Yes.
Well, I appreciate and I love the work that you're doing to try to get it turned around. And we certainly wish you the best and getting the number of kids. And I look forward to hearing about Elwood's games coming up on Friday nights.
Okay, sounds good. Thanks for having me.
I appreciate it. Sam Morellis, the head coach for the Elwood Panthers. 17 kids right now. Eddie, you did not play football at Decatur Central, correct?
No.
You played baseball?
I did.
How many were on? And how many are on a baseball team at the high school level?
Oh boy, it depends on how many teams you can field.
I mean, for the varsity.
15.
Okay. And so how many didn't make it? I mean, you had cuts, right?
You typically only had a couple cuts a year because we had a varsity, junior varsity, and then
you got a pretty good idea by the time you're like a junior where it's going, right?
Yeah.
Fair enough. And your best player played what position?
When I was there?
Yeah.
Pitcher.
Who was your pitcher?
Bradley Bramer.
Did he play beyond Decatur Central?
Yeah, he went to Wright State, then he transferred to Indiana, and now he is in AA, I think.
Really nice.
In the Baltimore Orioles organization.
And so you caught for him?
Yeah, he broke my thumb in high school.
I was going to say, how hard was that, honestly?
I think he was hitting high 80s, low 90s when I graduated, and then he was pretty much consistently low 90s after my graduation.
How many pass balls?
Not a lot.
He said that like that was he broke your thumb though?
Yeah, we were having a scrimmage in 38, 40 degree weather, and it was windy, so it was super cold, and I just caught it wrong and it broke my thumb.
That's not good for a catcher.
No, it's not.
Alejandro Kirk just had that this year. Speaking of that, we got to check in on our baseball game. We'll do exactly that. And A couple of guests lined up still yet to come. I want to get back into the conversation that we had earlier regarding Sophie
Also,
Cunningham.
Jake, we have
Yes,
an
sir.
egg on face moment with some audio to back it up.
For who?
You'll just have to wait and find out.
All right, we'll do it next.
Query and Company on 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan.
Every recruit and every current student athlete will hear this message repeatedly. We are here to win championships. If you don't want to win championships, go to Indiana.
Here's the snap, and this time they're just going to go down to the ground, and that will do it. And the rags to riches story for Indiana football comes to conclusion, and they are the national champions of 2026. What a football team.
Okay, so let me get this straight. Purdue has hired a new athletic director. He has arrived in West Lafayette, Tommy McClelland, right?
Yeah.
And I sang his praises yesterday of the hire and the day before based on his background of Rice and his background at Vanderbilt, and fundraising being a huge part of that job. And basically, like Coach Morellis is doing in Elwood, going around and shaking every tree, and not in this case for football players, but for dollars, and finding the money that is necessary for Purdue athletics. Now, let's go back to what he just said, and let me go back to something here. I have always been entertained by the rivalry between Purdue and Indiana. And I legitimately mean this. Obviously, if you play for Purdue or Indiana, you have an understanding of that rivalry. But in the professional world, I don't know that there is any job that more pronounces how big that rivalry is and how nonstop that rivalry is, more so than the job that we do here. Because it's amazing to me. I will never forget the most apt thing ever that Ed Sorensen said to me. When I was cutting my teeth in this line of work, Ed Sorensen, who was not from Indiana but had covered Arizona and Arizona State and went to Oregon, so he knew Oregon State. And he said to me, he said, Jake, there's nothing like the Indiana-Purdue rivalry, because he said, I literally could sit atop a billboard with a megaphone and every day scream out how Indiana's the best and Purdue is terrible for 364 days. And on the 365th, yell that Purdue is the best and Indiana is terrible. And for the next year, every IU fan will come up to me and say, you're the guy that screamed on the billboard about how Purdue is better than Indiana, and vice versa. And it is the truest thing ever. The constant stuff that I get from Indiana fans telling me that I favor Purdue, and then we talk about Purdue and the Purdue syndrome comes out about Indiana. And I have always said, for example, when Purdue, and I love Purdue, I do. I really enjoy going to their football games. I loved Gene Cady. I love Matt Painter. But I think even Matt Painter would agree with this. When you chant IU sucks when you're playing against Kent State, it only fuels that you are little brother who can't get it out of your head rent-free what your rivalry is doing. And Curt Cignetti, when he took the Indiana job, Curt Cignetti came out in order to get people to buy into Indiana and feel confident. Curt Cignetti made sure that everybody knew that he believed and that he was there, and there's a new sheriff in town. And you saw his quotes. I win, Google me. Purdue sucks, but so do Indiana Purdue sucks, but so do Michigan. Ohio State sucks, but so do Purdue and Michigan, or whatever it was that he said. You get where I'm going. Cignetti made all these outlandish comments, but he backed it up. They won a national championship. Now, I can understand and appreciate why an athletic director at Purdue, in a program right now from a football standpoint that is at the bottom of the Big Ten, their fundraising and their NIL probably lags behind. Their basketball program has been elite. But again, Elite Eight was the ceiling this past year. So you're trying to infuse and be funny and pump in that same level of bravado, and probably on the way there, on the flight from Houston to West Lafayette, somebody's like, Curt Cignetti's our rival head coach, and you know the comments he made where he said Purdue sucks and so do Ohio State and Michigan and da-da-da-da. And he thought to himself, well, I got one for him. And so lo and behold, they introduced the new athletic director at Purdue, whose job it is to get people invested, interested in financially boosting the Boilermakers. And he comes up with, Eddie, play it again, this comment from the new athletic director at Purdue.
Every recruit and every current student athlete will hear this message repeatedly. We are here to win championships. If you don't want to win championships, go to Indiana.
Okay. But we're entering football season. And every program in the United States of America, Boise State, Penn State, Arizona State, Florida State, Georgia Tech, Clemson, Cal, USC, they're all aspiring to win a championship, which means that when they do it, if this was the Masters and the reigning champion or the last year's champion has to put the green jacket on the winner, if you had to literally go up onto the stage and hand the trophy over, they're trying to wrestle away what's in the hands of Indiana. College basketball-wise, Purdue has been for 20 years the better program than Indiana. Fact. Indiana fans don't want to hear that, but it's fact. Right now, Purdue is the better basketball program than Indiana. But in the last 39 years, they have the same number of combined championships. There are other sports, I realize, where Purdue has won national championships, but egg on face is a good way of saying it. He was on the plane, and he's like, you know what? They told me Kurt Signetti came out guns a-blazing, and the IU fans loved it, and it rubbed the Purdue fans the wrong way. But I can't wait for this plane to land, baby, because wait till you hear the quote I got lined up. Wait till you hear it. Eddie, play it one more time. I've been working the flight from Houston to West Lafayette. I looked out my window, and we were somewhere over northern Arkansas. And I looked down at the Walmart headquarters in Bentonville and thought, I got another 90 minutes on this plane to come up with something. And boy, did I come up with a humdinger. Not roll it back, roll it forward, baby. Wait till they hear what I have to say.
Every recruit and every current student athlete will hear this message repeatedly. We are here to win championships. If you don't want to win championships, go to Indiana.
Okay. Okay. Right? Okay.
If you don't want to win championships, go to Indiana.
Okay.
Go to Indiana.
I like Purdue. Boiler up, baby. I love going to games at Ross 8 at night. That one probably you'd like a do-over, right?
Yeah, probably.
I don't know, by the way, if Tommy McClelland is staying at a Holiday Inn Express, but he doesn't need the omelet machine in the morning. He can just go ahead and take it right off the cheek of the egg in the face. Tony East next.
It's Query and Company.
I'm going to be keeping you company for the next few hours.
You are not going to believe the company.
This company.
You're going to bankrupt your mama's company?
At least I have the radio to keep me company.
On 93.5 and 107.5, The Fan.
Colts practice is an evening practice tonight, 8 o'clock. Jonathan Taylor has a new deal, 2 years and $44 million. 39 of that's guaranteed. That goes into effect at the end of this season because that is his final year on his contract. So
we don't
3
know
more
that
years.
for sure, though, Jake. They could have renegotiated it kind of or restructured. They could have added money onto this year. We don't know the full terms yet.
So you're saying that it's possible next year's the last year contractually he's bound to be a Colt?
No. Like, so they added 2 years onto the deal.
Right.
But they could have, kind of like when Miles Turner signed his extension with the Pacers on his last deal, they extended him, but they restructured the final year of the current deal to have more money to soak up some of the cap space they had. So like the Colts right now are what, 26, 31 million?
It is a reported 2-year deal of $44 million, $39 million of which is guaranteed.
Yes.
We just don't know how they divvy up when and where they pay that.
Correct.
But he has 3 years left as a Colt, 2 years beyond this, and then obviously this year in the final year of his current contract. So that's the news of the day for the Colts. For the Fever, we now know that Aaliyah Boston, Caitlin Clark, and Stephanie White, all three will be representing Team USA, representing the Fever for Team USA in September in the FIBA World Cup. Fever in action tonight coming up 7 o'clock. 6:30 is the pregame to be heard on this radio station. They take on the Las Vegas Aces, a team they have played well against that is very good. Joining us now on the Schwab Men's 2-in-1 hotline, he is with a number of different outlets, notably Circle City Spin, Locked On Pacers. Tony East joining us. Tony, you are or are not back from Ireland?
I am not in Ireland. I am home. And
you, with your trip to Ireland, before we get to the Fever, which, people want to hear about the Fever, I realize, but I do want to know this. Number one, did or did not go to the Cliffs when you were in Ireland?
We were only in Dublin, and then we also went to London. I don't know if I even told you that. That was part of this.
So Dublin, you were just in Dublin for like a day?
2.5 days, 3 days in Dublin, and then the same amount of time in London.
Okay. But I knew from the photo, I hate being that guy. There's nothing worse than when you're going on a trip and people are like, oh my gosh, I have a great restaurant you got to go to. I've got this, I got that. And you're like, yeah, come on, man. So I'd like to think, Tony, and feel free to tell me. I don't think that I was forceful about it. I think I presented it, hopefully at least I did, under the tense of if you get a chance and you're in the area or it wets your whistle, here are a couple of places I thought were cool. Is that fair?
That is correct, yes. You travel like me as well, it seems like.
Yeah, and you visited one of those places, correct?
I did.
Did
I
you
like to tell people what it was?
Yes. Well, you can go ahead, because I forgot the name of it until you sent me the photo.
Yeah, it's called Dawson's Lounge, and we went I don't know if I would have gone to just this, but we were right by it doing something else because it's right by the famous college of Dublin. And it's called Dawson's Lounge, and it is billed as the world/country's smallest bar. And the entrance is literally just like a thin door between two restaurants. And you go down into a basement, and there's 8 seats, and 4 of them are at the bar itself. It's so small. It's very cool.
Okay, did you actually get a beverage while you were there, or did you just walk in, look, take a picture, and leave?
I literally, I don't even think I took a picture inside. There was it's so small that there were other people in there, and I was like, it feels wrong to take a picture of the inside. But we did literally walk down there, and then we left. That was it.
Okay. Did you see the Book of Kells while you were at the university?
I did see the Book of Kells, yes.
Yeah, that's pretty, and I'll be honest, Tony, and then we'll get on to the things that people do know about. I didn't know anything about it before I went there. I found it fascinating.
I never heard of it, yeah.
Yeah, it is basically, for those that are unfamiliar, the Book of Kells is, and Tony, it's been, a couple of years since I was there, so you can fill in the blanks for me here. But it was, I believe, a 13th century book that tells essentially biblical story via almost microscopic level illustration that was done by monks using different coloring that they could do in that era. And then throughout the transport of Vikings and other such things in that area of the world, it managed to survive for 800 years and now is on public display.
Yeah, it literally went across an ocean and got like buried underground somehow, and it got stolen. It's like remarkable that they even have it. And yes, it is basically like it's not like a picture book. That's too extreme. Most of it is just text, but it's got all these crazy drawings, and the colors being that old are remarkable. And yeah, the museum, honestly, about how they made it is more interesting than the book itself, which is just like, okay, there's a book in a big case. But then you go upstairs to this library with like a giant globe and all the books. It looks fake. It's very cool.
Yeah, the library is amazing. You walk in there and you're like, oh my gosh. And then especially when you realize that the books on the shelf are from like, 1390. You know what I mean?
They were redoing that room with all the books, so they had like half of them were empty because people were working on them, and you couldn't. Yeah, it was like even then it looked amazing in there. It was so cool.
You think people just go and check out one of those books? Yeah, I went to the library and checked out a book. It was written in 1250. You know what I mean?
I don't even know if like I feel like if I picked up one of those books to grab it, it would like turn to dust in my hands.
I would agree with that, which is why they're doing a lot of work on it. Okay, yeah, Tony, I want to begin with this. Yesterday, and I'm going to get more into this once we're done talking here in terms of, but so we don't have to get into the basis or the origin of the conversation. I'm going to do that here in about 10 minutes. But Sophie Cunningham yesterday holding court and essentially saying, look, comments that I made in an interview well before the season began, I appreciate the narrative that is created, but we are here to play basketball, and it's time to focus on exactly what we are doing and the levels that we are playing. Is this the Fever's way as a team in particular? Have we reached the point, Tony, where it is wonderful that you are a transcendent franchise that means more to people than just basketball, but it seems like the franchise now is basically making the public plea, let us play and let's silence the noise. Fair assessment?
I think that's what they hope happens. I mean, it's hard when it's their own words. It's not like this is just being like made up, and they're reacting to some leak of some kind. But yeah, I think that's what they hope is the case, and it's becoming part of basketball, right? It's happening at their games, these rallies. It's happening with booze during the games, a meeting with a coach before the games. Like, it is part of basketball now, but it is certainly a separate, totally different story from what they hope and deserve in a lot of ways to have the story be, which is they're playing awesome. They just played the Lynx in a, awesome, like finals preview-esque game with tons of points and baller performances from killer players. And then this other stuff that, should be discussed, quite frankly, is dominating the headlines and dominating the conversation. And to them, a lot of the frustration should be, and has been like this for a while. It's like a lot of the people covering it are demanding answers for it are not around the team ever, or are not the ones asking them about it, right? So I get their frustrations. I get how it's gotten to this point, but they do have some things to answer for, and we did some of it yesterday. But yes, that it is a delicate balance for them right now of like they're playing awesome, and they should deserve to be talked about in that way. That finally, after a kind of choppy start, they're playing the basketball that they hope they could, and if they can find some defense, they could be like in the inner circle of title contenders.
They are very clearly, Tony East, offensively they probably are the best offensive team. I mean, it goes without saying, historical level here, right?
Like ever. Yes.
Correct. But what you saw against Minnesota, you lose that game 108-100, right? I've asked this question before, and I'll ask it to you in this simplistic a form. They are at what percentage of where they don't need to be the bad boy Pistons. They don't need to be some, the Ron Artest era Pacers defensively. They need to be competent, though. They are how close to becoming sufficient enough night in and night out defensively?
Yeah, it's honestly, it's so reminiscent of the finals run Pacers team, right? They got to average on defense, not even good, just average. And that was enough for their offense to just be like, yep, they're going to win a lot of games. Like, they're going to be super hard to beat every night. And they made the finals. And so it reminds me a lot of that. And they're kind of close. Like, honestly, early in the season, the Fever had a better defensive rating than offensive rating compared to the rest of the league, like as a ranking, not as a number. And I don't think they were that level of defense, but they have shown at times like a real level of defensive acumen. And the trouble they have and continue to have is like they love to rotate low and make Aaliyah Boston not clean up messes, but be their deterrent behind the play. And Aaliyah's pretty good at that, and they can rotate once. But then once they have to rotate again or be connected beyond that, they just really, really fall apart. And you can practice that all you want, but those literally by default are like recovering from breakdowns or recovering from somebody getting beat. And that's going to happen to them a lot. Like, let's face it, for all the good things about their team, their perimeter defenders are lacking. That's probably their biggest missing skill on the roster. And so there's just going to be a lot of nights where they're forced to defend behind the play or rotate or whatever. And so I think in a playoff setting, honestly, that is easier to overcome. You're playing the same team over and over. You can scheme and game plan for it in different ways, as we saw with the Pacers a few years ago. But on a night in, night out basis, you're just so susceptible to just like taking the ball out of the net over and over. And so what's made them better recently to me is that their offense has been so good that the other team is taking the ball out of the net and they're setting their defense as much as they can within a game. And that is enough for them to win. But when that doesn't happen, or they have like a few pockets of crummy offense, or they're really reliant on Kelsey Mitchell, like in Minnesota, it's great that she played that well, but they can't defend well enough to win just doing that. And I think that's where their issue is. So how close are they to being the defensive level they need? Honestly, I don't know that they will get to it this year. Their offense might just be the reason they win anything of note, which is good. Their offense is amazing, but they're kind of close. It's just that they have very, very rarely shown that they can actually get to that level for any sort of sustained amount of time.
Tony East is my guest. He's on the Schwab Men's 2-1 hotline. Fever in action tonight, taking on Las Vegas. All right, in conclusion to that, Tony, what is it about this Las Vegas team that is just a favorite? Because they are good, but it seems to be a favorable matchup for the Fever. Why?
Yeah, they've handled it really well. I mean, they almost beat them last year without Caitlin Clark in the playoffs. I mean, it was a remarkable series that they were almost able to win. I think honestly, the biggest factor is that, for all the players Aaliyah Boston has had struggles with in her time in the pros, Bree Jones, Jonquel Jones come to mind as like the two that give her the most fits as a player. She has fared pretty well against A'ja Wilson. And I'm not saying that anyone is stopping A'ja or is better than A'ja. A'ja's the MVP, but Aaliyah does a good job making her life hard and making her work on both ends of the floor, quite frankly, in a way that the Aces as a team just eventually kind of fumble around and they can't quite find enough solutions elsewhere. And, it's kind of unnatural for them to like get that deep into the paint before passing to A'ja with the way that the Fever defend. And so that matchup has kind of made everything else really possible. And they've really given the Aces trouble this year. I mean, they smoked that. I've covered the Fever for 7 seasons now, 6.5 really. And that game in Vegas they played in mid-July was the best game I've ever seen the Fever play, ever. I mean, they just crushed them. The reigning champs on their home floor, they absolutely smoked them. And so I think that that matchup, that anyone is giving A'ja Wilson, air quotes, trouble is a bit of a stretch, but that Aaliyah handles it so well makes life more possible for everybody else against a really good team. And that's where I feel like they, compared to other teams, do pretty well, whereas other star players cannot do as much in that matchup.
Circle City Spin and Locked On Pacers, Forbes Sports as well for Tony East. Fever in action tonight taking on Vegas. Tony, welcome home. I made the entire interview here without doing my fabulous Irish accent leprechaun voice. So consider yourself lucky, my lad. See?
Can you sing a song by the Dubliners to me in that entire accent, please?
I can do U2. I can do U2 and I can do Sinead O'Connor. And apparently, if you notice this, I don't know if you did or not, but Thin Lizzy is a huge thing over there. And I'm like, yeah, they had one hit over here. Probably classic rock fans disagree.
That is something so fascinating about just Europe in general, is like all the bars play like songs that were popular in America like 6 years ago.
Totally.
It's so bizarre.
That is exactly correct.
I heard so much The Weeknd last week.
Really?
Why? Yes.
Okay. That is, I wouldn't want to hear that here, let alone over there, right? All right, Tony, appreciate it.
Thanks, guys. Yeah.
Tony East joining us on the program. I want to get back into to put a tie on all of it, something I mentioned earlier. And I thought a lot about this, and I don't do that often. But I wanted to make sure that it was that because it is something that I feel there is a responsibility to address. And there is a reality to it. The reality is that the Indiana Fever, almost entirely because of the play and the transcendence of Caitlin Clark, are a national brand now. And they have been the epicenter of national discussion. And I'm going to say this in the same way that I said it earlier by prefacing by saying that I hope that even though this subject matter is one that isn't necessarily under the umbrella or the arena of sport on a regular basis, It has kind of been wedged in there now in this area with that, and it is a topic that can be an uncomfortable one for young people, families, etc., and I hope to be able to say it in a manner that is comfortable for everyone, including if you're with young people in the car, that kind of thing. I'm very aware of that. There is a reality. The Fever have been in the epicenter of news aside from sport for a while now. They have been a lead discussion in political discourse. They have been a lead discussion in social discussion. They have been a lead discussion in polarizing areas. And a lot of that is based upon the comments that were made by Sophie Cunningham in an interview well before the season began. They were not comments that were made in a vocal interview, but rather in a print interview. And she essentially, and I'm paraphrasing, in what is a very sensitive subject and becoming a more ubiquitous subject amongst the American landscape and social culture, Sophie Cunningham was asked her thoughts on athletes that were transitioned from one gender to the other playing in women's sports, notably, theoretically, possibly the WNBA. And she said that she feels it's important to protect the integrity of sport for young girls and women, and they should only be competing against other females. That comment was not publicized at the time, but rather now that Sophie Cunningham has become a star, not that she wasn't before, but now with The Point and Caitlin Clark and everything else, she's become a star, and she represents in a league that undoubtedly has a percentage. I don't know the percentage, but theoretically a higher percentage than other sports of its players that are out. And Sophie Cunningham is not. She is not only a straight player, but one that is like a fashion model persona within sport. She is a very feminine version of that. And that sounds odd to say it that way. But for that reason, her comments went out like a brush fire. And it became an extremely polarizing topic. And it became one that was convenient and comfortable to avoid, in particular on this program where you're not expecting to hear anything other than sports. People come here because they want to hear about Jonathan Taylor's new deal. People come here because they want to hear about the Colts getting ready for an 8 o'clock practice tonight, or the Fever getting ready to take on this game coming off their trip and being back home. But eventually, topics become so prevalent and so polarizing and at times so misinterpreted that I think the responsible thing is to address them before you can put them to bed. It's unfair to say we're not going to talk about that anymore if we have not before. And when Sophie Cunningham is coming out and saying we're not talking about that anymore because we're focused on basketball, I think it's important to address and offer the perspective as to what it is that is the polarizing topic, which is this. The WNBA is in a unique situation because the WNBA is made up by a number of its players, I don't know the percentage, but a noticeable number of its players that are in the LGBTQ plus, and I know that, and I understand why some people don't understand what all the acronyms are or how many there are. I get all that. Those are all discussions for another time and another place. But it is there. And there are a number of players for the Indiana Fever that fall within one of the acronyms of that umbrella. And one of the things that I do know is that people often associate with people that they feel are relatable to them. If you live in Indiana your whole life and you get transferred as a job transfer to New Mexico, and on your first day on the job in New Mexico, you happen to meet somebody in accounting that their grandparents lived in South Bend, so they spent time there growing up, you feel a connection to that person because there is a common ground there in a world that otherwise isn't as common to you. And so the WNBA is in kind of an interesting arena because you would have athletes that you would presume have a compassion, an understanding, and a feeling of obligation to defend or have the back of people that are also within the same umbrella of that grouping. And to an extent. I can't speak for all. I can't say emphatically to be true. But to an extent, those athletes would presumably feel a need, an obligation, a camaraderie with individuals who are trans because of some of the psychology and the challenge that goes into being different at a young age. And therefore, if they feel that it is a group that could potentially be marginalized, they want to make sure that they themselves, representing a group where they have felt marginalized, they don't want other people to feel that way. And so it becomes a slippery arena when then you think about, but if we start to open the door for that group, and I don't mean that group in a negative way, for people that are within the trans, for that community, people in the trans community, if we open the door, I'm saying if you are a WNBA player, towards allowing that, to what element do we police it? And there's a difference between perhaps somebody who is a young person that is a trans person, and then are we opening the door for a former NBA player that wants to play 5 more years, so they're just going to identify now as a woman, and now we've already opened the door that trans people are allowed in, and we have to allow them in, and then what do we do? That's an extreme and almost absurd hypothetical, but I think that there is discussion of people of, but how do we know it doesn't go there? Even though we're talking about a number right now that is very minuscule, less than a 100th of a percentage of athletes in NCAA Division I, for example. Now, I mentioned earlier, I'm a believer in compromise. Henry Clay was the great compromiser, and I think a great, from a historical perspective, a great historical figure because he was the great compromiser. And before I decided that we needed to speak on this, because yesterday Sophie Cunningham addressed it, I went and did some research on it. And what I found is that and I hope I have the name of the organization correct, the National Association of Women in Sport. I believe that's the name of the organization. Billie Jean King is a member of it. They have come up with a guideline that says there is an importance towards young people integrating boys and girls together in sport, boys that want to try a girl's sport at a young age. There are boys that wanted to play volleyball before men's volleyball was out there. There are little girls. I coached a girls or a 7 and 8 year old basketball team, and we had a little girl on the team. She's a very good player. She wanted to play basketball. There wasn't a league in the group that I was in for girls, and so she played. And she was a great teammate. 7, 8 years old. The integration of that has always been there in terms of young people playing a sport of the different gender to try something new and try something different. The protection of people to make sure that they don't feel marginalized at a young age is a very important thing. And sport is about learning principles of teammates that are different than you, common bond, teamwork, goal, winning versus losing, meeting goals, work ethic, discipline, all of those things. And those things are very important for people to learn at a young age, just as it's also very important at a young age to feel included and feel a part of something. So much of who we become as an adult roots back to how we were treated and who we were between the ages of 5, let's say, and 15 or 16, and who believed in us and who supported us and how much inner strength we had to find. And so if your worry is with people that are trans, making sure that inclusion is a part of their world, as it should be, to make sure that they have a comfort level, I think the great compromise would be what Billie Jean King and that Association of Women's Sport have come up with, which is allow for that integration of an individual that is trans or is considering that, allow them to play within that crossover of sport until the age in which one transitions from a youth and adolescent into young adulthood. And by that I mean, it's just like I mentioned earlier. You can take a baby cub and bottle feed it every day and have the most wonderful, loving pet. But the second that a male grizzly bear goes through his version of puberty and the testosterone within a grizzly bear is then placed, his wild natural instincts take over, and he literally forgets that he was bottle fed by you. Now, that doesn't happen with men. That's absurd for me to say that, except for that to say that chemically speaking, even somebody whose lifestyle, interests, and everything else are of the opposite gender during the time that they're figuring those things out, once they go through that puberty, the biology then does change for physical advantage. And therefore, I believe the great compromise is that I read from this association led by Billie Jean King, which is allow for that inclusion to be as widespread as you'd like until the age that one has gone through the natural testosterone change of the puberty of a young man. Because the formidable years are extremely important to not only feel a part of something and be able to feel good about who and what you want to be, but also young adulthood and sport is about learning that sometimes life is not always catered to what it is that you want to be. You might want to be, I wanted to be a guy that could play for Bob Knight. I wasn't good enough. And I had to learn other avenues and other ways for sport to allow me to stay within it after my years of young adulthood. And that's what sport is supposed to be about, teaching you the principles and the foundations of where you can succeed and or fail in life and be okay with it and feel good about yourself. And I understand, I have compassion for, I have heart, and I will defend to the death the right for anybody to be able to live as it so be they choose to express themselves. But it doesn't mean that everything then is catered towards their expression. And that's why I think the great compromise is exactly that. You allow it before the age of the literally biological change that takes place within puberty. And then after that, you play the sport that you were designed in terms of your birth certificate of what biologically you were when you were born. And the WNBA is in an interesting crossroad with all of that. But Sophie Cunningham's comments and yesterday coming out and saying it's time to focus on who we are as a team, I think was the Fever's way of saying, let us now play basketball and let the social commentary take an off season. But unfortunately, it's not always up to them to determine what is linked to them in terms of the discussion, and that arena and that door has been open, and I understand it. But I also understand and appreciate both sides of this very polarizing topic, of which both sides, I think, have very good and sound answers. But in the great compromise, I think that of the timelines and the importance of young people feeling included and then having to adhere to what Billie Jean King's association came up with is probably the right answer. And with that, on this show, it's probably not a topic that we will dive into much more deeper beyond simply that. Colts are in action tonight, 8 o'clock practice. Did you say we do have Nathan, by the way, Eddie?
No, not today.
Okay.
I think he's joining us tomorrow.
Sounds good. Nathan Baird from the Indianapolis Star to talk about the Colts, but also what we are looking for with that here as camp resumes. What's that, Eddie?
He's Purdue.
Nathan Baird's Purdue. I'm sorry. I was thinking of Nathan Brown with the Colts. Sorry.
You're good.
Nathan Baird for Purdue will join us talking about Purdue from the Indianapolis Star tomorrow, which is of note because of the comic relief we can offer you with the new hire that the Boilermakers have. We'll explain what I'm talking about next.
You're listening to Query and Company on 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan.
So Nathan Baird will join us tomorrow. Purdue has a new athletic director. Now, I'm going to... There have been... Dan Campbell, when he was the head coach of the Detroit Lions. You remember when Dan Campbell got hired as the head coach of the Detroit Lions?
Talking about biting kneecaps?
Yes.
And then you got, Nick Sirianni with, philosophical about flowers and things like that?
And those guys, Dan Campbell hasn't gone to a Super Bowl, but he's gotten pretty darn close. And with the Lions, that's saying something.
Then years ago, you had Adam Gase with the eyes of not knowing where he was at or where he was looking?
Yeah, you've had press conferences that just went awry. And then you've had those press conferences where guys come out and say something and everybody's on board. We won the press conference, and then they go out and nothing happens. And certainly, I'm not saying that you need to go out there and be Johnny rah-rah, like let's get everybody on board, everybody's in. I mean, you don't need to be John Goodman in Revenge of the Nerds, right?
Got Liam Cohen a couple years ago now with the zesty Duval.
When you were a baby, your father looked at you and had one thought. Someday my boy will grow to be a man. You just got whipped by a bunch of nerds. Nerds! You don't need everybody doing that, but you want to have some level of competence. Know your audience and read the room. Read the room. That's all you ask. Tommy McClelland is the new athletic director at Purdue University. I say new. Babinski is on his way out, and then McClelland takes over. And on its surface, I think it's a good hire. And I talked about it the last couple of days, why I think it's a good hire. You're coming from Rice. Did you have rice for dinner last night, Eddie? I know you said you like rice.
Last night I did not.
Do you just go with white rice?
Yeah, most of the time. White rice or cheddar broccoli.
Do you mix like a solution in with the rice?
Well, obviously there's water. That's how you make it.
Well,
first
but
and
I mean,
foremost.
but do you mix
And turn
in
it
like
from
a
grain into the rice.
concoction? Any sort of,
lemon juice, lime juice, parsley.
Do you buy
and
that
a
little plastic
salt.
fake lime at the grocery store and just squeeze that? Is that where you get your lemon juice or your lime juice?
No, I buy limes and I squeeze them.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay. Fair enough.
Yeah.
It's a rather, it's a good way of doing it, right?
Much more natural.
Okay, fair enough.
And pure.
But either way, if you're coming from Rice and Vanderbilt, you are used to being at programs that have prominent and wealthy alumni that don't have great athletic success first and foremost. They do. I mean, Vanderbilt's got a very good baseball program. They've obviously been better in football. They're one of the 4 losses Indiana had in Indiana's last national championship in basketball. Foreshadowing what I'm about to mention. Barry Goheen and Will Purdue went crazy, and Indiana lost at Vanderbilt in 1987. They went 30-4 that year, 1 of 4 losses. But Rice and Vanderbilt are both elite academic schools with proud alumni who don't necessarily think to immediately tap into the athletics, perhaps. I'm not saying Purdue is at that level per se, but this is someone who is used to raising money and building awareness for an athletic program where it doesn't necessarily, in the past, in places where that wouldn't be the easiest sell. Now, Eddie, Rice is an elite-level academic institution in Houston, Texas. Rice was in the old Southwest Conference. I believe that was Texas A&M, Texas Tech, Baylor, Arkansas, Rice, SMU, and Houston was the old Southwest Conference. I don't know who Rice's athletic rival is. Rice is an elite academic institution, so I don't even know who their rival within the state of Texas would be. There aren't a lot of schools like it. Maybe Baylor is their rival. I don't know. Rice is like Northwestern. Like there are schools they consider to be a rival, and those rival schools are like, really? They consider me a rival? Okay, whatever. They're just kind of a nuisance on a road trip. Vanderbilt is an elite academic institution. I have no idea who Vanderbilt considers their rival. Tennessee, maybe? But Tennessee considers Florida their rival or Georgia their rival. Vanderbilt's just like, I don't know. That's a place where like we get, pretty good hot chicken when we're on the road and then we play them and we go home, right? So maybe it is excused that if you're coming from those two schools, you don't have a full grasp and comprehension on what rivalry means. And maybe if you're coming from those schools, all you know about Indiana is that Vanderbilt beat them in 1987, and you find it funny that Vanderbilt still mentions that because you're like, 87 was a long time ago, but that's the last time Indiana won a national title in basketball, so, man, they're living in the past too. Maybe that's what you're thinking. And you're flying from Houston to West Lafayette for your press conference, and while you're on the plane, he's like, now, so tell me again about our rival. Well, your rival's Indiana. And they've got a coach, this guy named Curt Cignetti, and he came from James Madison, and he's kind of goofy, and he wears like hoodies that are a little too big on him, and he kind of fish hands it when he's on the sidelines. But when he came to Indiana, they had the losingest program in the history of college football, and he made all kinds of weird comments about how, like, I just win, Google me, and Purdue sucks, but so do Ohio State and Michigan. And he was really kind of cocky, and it rubbed people the wrong way. But it galvanized some interest within the Indiana fan base. And maybe Tommy McClelland didn't get the rest of the story. Maybe his Paul Harvey radio show turned off prematurely and he didn't get the rest of the story. And maybe he doesn't know that for Curt Cignetti, like, it kind of worked out. Because Curt Cignetti went to Indiana and in year one turned them around, and it was like, oh my gosh, they're like 9-0 and they're going to Ohio State or 8-0 or whatever they were, and then they get the college football playoff. Are you kidding me? And then in year two, they go 16-0 and they win it. And guess what? They're the national champions. So maybe Tommy McClelland's flying on the plane. He's looking out his window. He's flying over Arkansas. And he's like, hey, Arkansas, you know what? I mean, Nolan Richardson won a title since Indiana last won one. I know because I was at Vanderbilt, and that's all they talked about. And Indiana fans talk about banners. They haven't won one since 1987. And maybe he was so caught up in that, and he was so caught up in coming up with the bravado that he didn't even stop to think about what's happened. Maybe nobody told him the rest of the story with Curt Cignetti. But he was going to have, gosh darn it, his Curt Cignetti moment. He was going to have it. And he dropped this gem in West Lafayette just a couple hours ago.
Every recruit and every current student athlete will hear this message repeatedly. We are here to win championships. If you don't want to win championships, go to Indiana.
Okay. Okay. There's only one current national champion in college football. There's only one. And I love Matt Painter and that Purdue basketball program, and I do really believe that they are close. But literally, when you're on the flight from Houston to West Lafayette, and I assume it was like some small plane because West Lafayette and Purdue, they got their own landing strip, and they got their own airport, and they got their own aeronautics and all of that stuff, right? So it's probably some little plane, and he's on it, and somebody says, now, Tommy, when you get there, people in Purdue, we need a little juice. We need a little juice in the building. We need a little excitement.
Would you like to know the last championship for Purdue in any sport?
In any sport?
Yes.
Well, certainly off the top of my head, I know that they won one in women's basketball in 99, right?
Correct. They've won two since then.
Okay. Did they win one in wrestling?
No.
Okay, go ahead, hit me.
Women's golf in 2010.
I did know that. Ashley Browse, her dad was the coach, I believe, at one point, yes.
Cheerleading, 2018.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Okay. I mean, that's a good one to win it in.
Golf in 61 and men's basketball in 1932.
Well, lo and behold, that's about to change because I got news for you. The AD has this to say. Again, the AD has this to say.
Every recruit, every current student athlete will hear this message repeatedly. We are here to win championships. If you don't want to win championships, go to Indiana.
Okay. God love him, right? A for effort. And I think he's going to be a fine athletic director. But so far, scoreboard championships, press conference, Indiana 1, Purdue nothing. J&V, we'll find out what he's got cooking, what he's warming up for his program at 3 o'clock as the crossover with Love Heating and Air, love-hvac.com, 317-353-2141. We'll preview John's show, and we'll do it next. Hey there, Jake Query for Surfside. Look for the can with the sunset stripes. Surfside is iced tea with a splash of vodka, lemonade with a splash of vodka, and Super Light. Don't forget that. The new sports drinks from Surfside. Super Light, just 90 calories, 2 grams of sugar, 100 calories in Surfside, and oh, so easy to enjoy because with no carbonation, so smooth. Look for it wherever you buy your favorite adult beverages. Please be 21 and please consume responsibly. Hey there, Jake Query for Chicago's Pizza. 19 locations across central Indiana and 26 across the state. I love Chicago's Pizza. Love it. You know why? Hoosier through and through. Started right here in Indiana in 1979, and Ron Epple, who I've gotten to know, great guy, and Hoosier value, right? Started out living in a small town, southern Indiana, went to IU, and then said, you know what? I want to make pizza, and I want to make it for people to enjoy across the state. Whether it's Ball State fans, IU, Purdue fans, doesn't matter. I want them to know that Chicago's Pizza is a part of their community. With a story in every slice and folks that take pride in what they're doing, giving back to their local community. And the best part about it, the pizza. Fresh dough every single day, breadsticks made by hand right there every single morning, and the salad bar with all the fixings. You got still until 1:30 today to get in for the lunch buffet to enjoy all of that and a soft drink for a price that is better than what you're paying across the street. And the family meal deal, 2 medium, 1 topping pizzas, just $25, and that comes with a fresh order of breadsticks as well. Everything that I learn each and every day about Chicago's Pizza is another thing I love about it, and I know you'll feel the same. Chicago's Pizza, check them out online at chicagospizza.com.
is Query and Company on 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan.
By the way, and I love this, Chicago's Pizza. You know I love Chicago's Pizza anyway. But the location on Stop 11 Road coming up on August the 10th. If I'm not mistaken, the 10th is Monday, I believe. Let me check my calendar to make sure that I have that exactly correct. Yes, Monday. This coming Monday, Chicago's Pizza, Stop 11 Road. Let's get everybody to stop in between 5 and 8 p.m. 5 and 8 p.m. And be sure to mention Down Syndrome, Indiana. And it is a fundraiser for the Buddy Walk and benefiting Down Syndrome, Indiana, and the help and the great work that they do in helping out. And I know a little about that organization as well. And that's what I love about Chicago's Pizza. Like I mentioned, always doing what they can to help out. Dine to Donate, coming up Monday, 5 until 8 o'clock on Stop 11 Road, 5920 East Stop 11 Road. Mentioning DSI as you're checking out, and 20% of the purchase goes directly to helping out for the annual Buddy Walk for Down Syndrome, Indiana. Absolutely outstanding. J&B joining us now to find out what he has got working for his program that begins at 3 o'clock today. Colts practice tonight, 8 p.m. John, what's on the big docket for the show today?
We'll talk Jonathan Taylor. I'm sure Mike Chappell will join us a little bit later. I don't know. Like, I was kind of outspoken about not putting money further down the line on folks that probably won't be here, right?
Yep.
When this thing is said and done. So I don't know if I was the biggest fan. I do gather this, Jake. He's the best player on the team, and the best player needs to be paid in that fashion. But, man, I don't know if I jack around with a lot of things, considering, you don't know where this thing is going right now. And if it's going anywhere the way you're thinking, it's probably not going to be with this particular group. So that's the concern I had above all else.
Here's the other thing, John, and I agree with you. He's a wonderful talent, right? And he deserves the compensation for that. And it is starting to turn a little bit more towards a run-friendly league. However, with that said, I still do question whether or not you can be an upper echelon NFL team in 2026 when your best player is a running back.
Yeah, well, you can argue that across the board with the personnel right here, and we'll talk about the same thing regarding the left guard in the not-too-distant future. What in the world are you thinking? How much money are you going to sink in that position? For what? And a lot of it, too, Jake, it's weighted because we've seen the lack of results, and this has not been the problem with Jonathan Taylor, nor has it been the problem with Quentin Nelson, but they've been a part of a team that has not shown the results. So it's weighted. That's how we feel. I do understand why you have to pay the guys that are your good players, but if it doesn't lead to the results that are necessary, then you kind of wonder, all right, so why is this going on? Especially if this group probably, if things don't go well this season, will not be here next year.
Yeah, I did think, John, the fact that they gave him 2 years. So this year, obviously the last year of his deal, and then he has 2 years where he's contractually bound. That kind of gives Taylor, I think, it looks to me like his agent basically was like, look, we're going to take the money, but I don't want any more than those deals because we don't have a guarantee as to what system he's going to be playing under, because there is no guarantee that this, certainly GM, but GM coach combo is going to be here beyond this year if it goes south. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I think there were two situations. I think the same thing happened with Daniel Jones, right? And he got that 2-year extension too with that money. So I understand it. I'm not mad at it, but I'm firmly against adding things and guys and people making decisions that aren't going to be around and have to live and soak up these decisions further down the road.
Yeah, no doubt about that. 3 o'clock today, J&B is on now. John, we still got a couple weeks before you're out at Colts camp, correct?
Yeah, I know. I don't know. Maybe Colts camp in 2029 at this pace right now.
Jonathan Taylor gets another contract, and John will be there for it when it happens.
Jonathan Taylor will be a grandfather by the time I think I get up there. So, yeah, it's all right, though. But hey, Howard Jones, too. Howard Jones, one of my all-time favorites, musician-wise.
Man, you guys
are going to be in town tomorrow, and he's on today.
You guys have been buddies a long time, you and Howard Jones, right?
Yeah, and Steve Shunk, too. Steve Shunk and Howard Jones are real tight.
Yeah, Shunk's the best. Shunk's
he is.
Steve Shunk, former and still to a great extent PR person. Now with Borg Warner, he's been in the racing scene forever, but just the best and the window to greatness for certain. All right, John, we'll be tuned in 3 o'clock today.
You got it, buddy. Thanks.
All right, J&B joining us courtesy of Love Heating and Air, love-hvac.com is the website. 317-353-2141 is the telephone number, bringing you the crossover each and every day. All right, tomorrow, again, on the show tomorrow, we'll talk about that absolutely awesome press conference with Purdue. And again, if you want to win championships, you go to Purdue. You do not go to Indiana. You'll be hearing that repeated a lot, said Tommy McClelland. We'll talk to Nathan Baird, who covers the Boilermakers tomorrow. Also, Matt Taylor will join us tomorrow, the voice of the Colts. And I love it. I want to see everybody out there. Opening day, Indiana State Fair tomorrow out at the Dairy Bar right in front. The grilled cheese, the milkshakes, they'll join me on the show. One of my favorite days of the year. It happens tomorrow, and I would love to see you between 10 and 1 tomorrow. We will join you then live from the Dairy Bar. In the meantime, I thank you, as always, for listening to Query & Company.